Hello, this is Shmuel Moshe, and you are listening to the Weekly Parashahcast Season 2, the show where I read the Tanakh and provide my own interpretations of what I think it all means. This week's episode falls during Parashat Vayigash, falling on the 4th of Tevet, 5785, January 4th, 2025. Happy New Year. We are resuming with chapters 4 through 6 of Shoftim, the books of Judges, and we'll be going right into that. So, as we begin, as always, I'd like to remind everybody I'm not a professional Torah or Tanakh scholar, just somebody who wanted to study. With that in mind, English translation comes from Chabad.org, so be sure to tune in there if you want to follow along. Let's go ahead and begin. Shoftim chapter 4, verse 1. And the children of Israel continued to do that which was evil in the eyes of the Lord, and Ehud was dead. And the Lord gave them over into the hand of Jabin, the king of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor, and the chieftain of his army was Sisera, and he dwelt in Haroshet Goyim. And the children of Israel cried to the Lord, for he had 900 iron chariots, and he oppressed the children of Israel mightily for 20 years. Now Deborah was a woman prophetess, the wife of Lapidot. She judged Israel at that time. And she sat under the palm tree of Deborah, between Ramah and Bethel, in the mountain of Ephraim, and the children of Israel came up to her for judgment. And she sent and called Barak the son of Abinoam out of Kadesh Naphtali, and she said to him, Indeed the Lord God of Israel commanded, Go and draw toward Mount Tabor, and take with you 10,000 men of the children of Naphtali, and of the children of Zebulun. And I shall draw to you to the brook Kishon Sisera, the chieftain of Jabin's army, with his chariots and his multitude, and I will give him into your hand. And Barak said to her,
If you will go with me, then I shall go. But if you will not go with me, I shall not go.
And she said, I shall surely go with you, but your glory will not be on the way which you go, for into the hand of a woman will the Lord deliver Sisera. And Deborah arose and went with Barak to Kadesh. And Barak gathered Zebulun and Naphtali to Kadesh, and 10,000 men went up at his feet, and Deborah went up with him. Now Heber the Kenite had separated from the Kenites of the children of Hobab, the father-in-law of Moses, and he pitched his tent as far as Elon Bezanaim, which is by Kadesh. And they told Sisera that Barak the son of Abinoam had gone up to Mount Tabor. And Sisera gathered all his chariots, 900 iron chariots, and all the people that were with him, from Haroshet Goyim to the brook Kishon. And Deborah said to Barak, Rise, for this is the day which the Lord has given Sisera into your hand. Did not the Lord go out before you? And Barak went down from Mount Tabor with 10,000 men after him. And the Lord confused Sisera and all the chariots, and all of the camp with the edge of the sword before Barak. And Sisera alighted from his chariot, and fled on foot. And Barak pursued the chariots and the camp to Haroshet Goyim, and all of Sisera's camp fell by the edge of the sword, not even one was left. And Sisera fled on foot to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, for there was peace between Jabin king of Hazor and the house of Heber the Kenite. And Jael went out to meet Sisera, and said to him, Turn in, my lord, turn to me, fear not. And he turned into her into the tent, and she covered him with a garment. And he said to her,
Give me now a little water to drink, for I am thirsty.
And she opened the flask of milk, and gave him to drink, and covered him. And he said to her,
Stand in the doorway of the tent, and it shall be, if any man comes and asks you and says, Is a man here? Then you shall say, There is not.
And Jael, the wife of Heber, took the tent pin, and placed the hammer in her hand, and came to him stealthily, and thrust the pin into his temple. And it pierced through into the ground, and he was in a deep sleep and weary, and he died. And behold, Barak pursued Sisera, and Jael came out to meet him, and she said to him, Come, and I will show you the man whom you seek. And he came to her, and behold, Sisera lay dead, and the pin was in his temple. And God subdued on that day Jabin the king of Canaan, before the children of Israel. And the hand of the children of Israel prevailed constantly harder against Jabin the king of Canaan, until they had destroyed Jabin, king of Canaan. End of chapter 4. All right, so we're continuing right off with the previous portion, or previous chapter. The idea is, of course, a judge will be born to Israel, and that judge will usher in a period of freedom. And then after that judge dies, the Israelites turn to sin once again and get captured, enslaved, and so on. So in this case, Ehud was the previous prophet, or judge rather, and then from there, they go into being enslaved or held captive by the Canaanites, King Yabin, and he reigns over Hazor. He's got a really great general named Sisera who commands 900 chariots, so he's a pretty serious guy. Now, a woman this time is the prophet who receives the messages from on high. She is the judge, and she sits under her palm tree, and people will come to her essentially with their things that they need judgments for, and they go to her for help in this case. So she straight up tells them the solution to the problem. All right, you are going to take armies from Naphtali and from Zebulun, and you're going to march on to Mount Tabor, and Sisera, the general of the army from the enemy, is going to be delivered into your hands. The Lord will deliver him unto you. And he's like, well, I don't believe that for a second. Unless you're going to come with me, I'm not going. And she's like, oh no, I'm going to go with you. But I just want you to know, the way you're going, the glory is not going to be in your hand, essentially. God's going to give you this victory, but the general will be delivered into a woman's hand rather than yours. And sure enough, the battle happens. They send the army off. Now, interestingly, it notes that there is a little bit of information passing around as far as how they find out. So they go out to the mountain, and likewise, Heber the Kenite had separated from the Kenites of the children of Hobab, father-in-law of Moses. So this is some important context. We heard before, Hobab, or Jethro, right? The names of Moses' father-in-law. He has sons, the Kenites, and they live among Israel. Now, among the Kenites is a guy named Heber, and he broke off from his brothers. And so he pitches his tent as far as Elon Bezananim. And it says, and they told Sisera that Barak, the son of Abinoam, had gone up to Mount Tabor. So the question is, who told them? Or how did they get the information? Maybe it was their own information network. Maybe it's the Kenites who are able to give this information. But we do find out later that there is an alliance of sorts, or there's a friendly arrangement between the king Yabin and Heber, who is a former Kenite who has gone his own way. So the army goes, they face the Israelites on the mountain, and sure enough, they are defeated by the Israelites. It says God caused them to be confused, and things go crazy. So it all goes that way. Now, with that being said, Sisera, as his men are being defeated, basically bails out of his chariot and starts running away on foot. And eventually, he gets to the wife of Heber the Kenite, Yael. So it's very interesting. The question is, why does she do this? Because we find out that he goes to her, to the tent, specifically because he knows that this is a person that is allied with his master, right? The king, Yabin, is allied with this guy whose wife he's now talking to. So, he runs to them, and she says, come to me, come into me, fear not, get over here, and I'll keep you safe. And, please give me some water. And she gives him milk. And it's, then he sends her, go stand guard for me, would you? And if anybody shows up, tell them I'm not here. Tell them there's no one here. And he falls into slumber. And while he's sleeping, she sneaks over and she takes the spike that they use to pin the tent into the ground. And with the hammer, she drives it through his head. So she basically hammers a giant nail through his head and kills him in his sleep. So first she gives him the milk, puts him to sleep, and then he's out. So when the people of Barak and his Israelites, they show up to pursue Sisera, they find Yael, and as was mentioned before, right, Deborah said to him, the way which you go is not the way that this was going to go down. It's going to be delivered into the hands of a woman. Yael was that woman. So this is how the general Sisera was defeated. Formerly, he was put to death by this woman, and they come across her, and soon enough, in time, they continue until they liberate themselves and destroy the king Yabin, king of Canaan, and there you have it. Now, I do want to bring up one thing I find curious about this. So, why does she do this? There are a few things to consider. I'm going to go on a limb here and say that part of it is because Yael may be married to Heber, but if he comes from the Kenites, who are the sons of Moses' father-in-law, then these are people who come from a God-fearing household. She herself, there's no clear answer. Who was Yael? Where did she come from? She's his wife, but where did she come from? Who was she a family of before she married her husband? We could look for clues. The specifics are not important. Could she be an Israelite woman that married this Kenite man? Could she be a Kenite who still respected and feared God, just as Jethro feared God and acknowledged that God of Israel was the strongest, most high God there is? We don't know for sure, but we do have some other things to consider. She's choosing to do this. She's choosing to betray her husband's ally, essentially, instead for the sake of the Israelites, and to take out this general. Why? Well, I don't know for sure, but I think that might be the reason. The other thing is that she gives him milk rather than giving him water. He asks for water. So now the question is, why milk? I almost want to say this is a matter of compassion or mercy, or it's because the milk helps him to sleep, to fall asleep. So in doing so, he lowers his guard. So basically, to just give him water would just be like, okay, I'm still on edge, thanks for the water, but I'm still freaking out. Alternatively, she gives him this milk, and there's something very matronly about this act. While she covers her, she covers him in a garment, she gives him milk. It's very motherly. And so he can relax, he's at ease. Please go watch the door and say nobody's here. And she's like, okay, I'll do that. He trusts her. She creates this environment of trust. Is there significance beyond this? Is there an existing relationship between these people? Sure enough, he goes there because he believes that he is safe, because there's an alliance, right, between them. And so, as it says, he flees to the tent of Yael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, for there was peace between Yabin the king of Hazor and the house of Heber the Kenite. So he goes to the woman's tent. I mean, it didn't even say that he went to like the guy's tent. He went to the woman's tent. Now, there's also a matter of, is this disrespectful to like put yourself in a woman's tent? Because now we also have to think that maybe she chooses to do this because it looks like she's having an affair. If they happen upon this, she'll look like she's an adulterer. So that's another possibility. You can't have some man hiding in your garments under the blankets and being all stealthily, withheld. So it could have been for this reason that she chose to take action. Regardless of the exact reason, her actions do end up delivering this general dead to Barak and his army. But it certainly makes you ask a lot of questions as to why she did it the way she did. That was the weapon she had, and indeed, she staked his head to the ground, and I think that's an unnecessarily, very rough way to do this. So I think to do so is also probably a symbolic gesture to pin his head to the ground, as if to say, you have let you become a part of the pinnings of this tent, that you had the audacity to come in here and do this. Yes, I will not be a liar. There shall be no man here because you're dead. And as soon as he's killed and Barak shows up, she reveals him right away. So the specifics, again, I'm not 100% clear on. This is my first time reading it, but I do think that those different factors are certainly relevant. She could be a former Israelite. She could just be a God-fearing person. She could be offended or afraid of losing her honor and pride that some man came into her tent like this. Or it could be that she recognized a message from above or something that gave her a warning to do this. We don't know that for sure either. But in doing so, it also helps to probably bridge the Kenites back with the Israelites in this way, or at least this fellow. It doesn't say what comes of her afterward, but now we know. In any case, they liberate themselves from Canaan. We move on to chapter 5. Chapter 5 of Judges, verse 1. Now Deborah and Barak, the son of Abinoam, sang on that day, saying, When breaches are made in Israel, when the people offer themselves willingly, bless the Lord. Hear, O kings, give ear, O princes. I to the Lord I shall sing to the Lord, the God of Israel. Lord, when you went forth out of Seir, when you marched out of the field of Edom, the earth trembled, the heavens also dripped, also the clouds dripped water. The mountains melted at the presence of the Lord. This was at Sinai, because of the presence of the Lord, the God of Israel. In the days of Shamgar, the son of Anat, in the days of Yael, caravans ceased, and travelers walked on crooked paths. The open cities ceased. In Israel they ceased until I, Deborah, arose. I arose as a mother in Israel. When they chose new gods, then there was war in the cities. Was there seen a shield or a spear when the 40,000 went against Israel? My heart is toward the lawgivers of Israel, that offered themselves willingly among the people, saying, Bless the Lord. The riders of white donkeys, those that sit in judgment, and those that walk on the path, tell of it. Instead of the noise of adversaries between the places of drawing water, there they will tell the righteous acts of the Lord, the righteous acts of restoring open cities in Israel. Then the people of the Lord went down to the cities. Praise, praise, Deborah, praise, praise, utter a song, arise, Barak, and capture your captives, son of Abinoam. Then ruled a remnant among the mighty of the nations. The Lord dominated the strong for me. Out of Ephraim, whose root was against Amalek, after you will be Benjamin with your abaters. Out of Machir came down officers, and out of Zebulun they that handle the pen of the scribe. And the princes of Issachar were with Deborah, as was Issachar with Barak. Into the valley they rushed forth with their feet, but among the divisions of Reuben there were great resolves of heart. Why do you sit between the borders to hear the bleatings of the flocks? At the divisions of Reuben there are great searchings of the heart. Gilead abides beyond the Jordan, and Dan, why does he gather into the ships? Asher dwelt at the shore of the seas, and by his breaches he abides. Zebulun is a people that jeopardize their lives to die, as did Naphtali, upon the high places of the field. The kings came and fought, then fought the kings of Canaan in Tanach. By the waters of Megiddo they took no gain of money. From heaven they fought, the stars from their courses fought against Sisera. The brook Kishon swept them away, the ancient brook, the brook Kishon. Tread down, O my soul, their strength. Then were pounded the heels of the horses by reason of the prancings of their mighty ones. Curse you, Meroz, said the messenger of the Lord. Curse you bitterly, you inhabitants thereof, because they came not to the aid of the Lord, against the mighty. Blessed above women shall Yael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, be. Above women in the tent shall she be blessed. Water he requested, but milk she gave him. In a lordly bowl she brought him cream. She put forth her hand to the pin, and her right hand to strike the weary. She struck Sisera, pierced his head, and wounded and penetrated his temple. At her feet he sank, fell, lay at her feet he sank, and fell. Where he sank, there he fell down dead. Through the window the mother of Sisera looked forth, and peered through the window. Why is his chariot late in coming? Why tarry the strides of his chariots? The wisest of her princesses answer her. She too returns answers to herself. Are they not finding and dividing the spoils? A damsel, 2 damsels to every man? A spoiled of dyed garments to Sisera, a spoiled of dyed garments to embroidery, dyed garments of embroidery for the neck of the spoiler. So may perish all your enemies, O Lord, but they that love him should be as the sun when he goes forth in his might. And the land rested 40 years. So to quickly summarize, there is a song, the song of these two was sung throughout the land, or at least among these folk, that when peace happens, it's great, but when breaches are made in Israel, when the people offer themselves willingly, bless the Lord, so hey, we did it, we won, and it's all thanks to us praising God and trusting God. And now it's a recollection of all the different things that took place throughout these different journeys, leading up to now Yael here. And it says that the mountains melted at the presence of the Lord, etc., etc. In the days of Shamgar, the son of Anat, in the days of Yael, caravans ceased and travelers walked on crooked paths. So what it's really saying here is during the time period that this all was taking place in, during the rule of Yabin the Canaanite, the country was in turmoil. The people of the land could not move. This says caravans ceased and travelers walked on crooked paths. What does that mean? It means that the roads were unsafe. It means that people could not freely move between the cities because there was a tyrant in control, or worse, bandits roaming about. There was no safety for the people of Israel. Open cities ceased until Deborah arose, right? So she came forth and it fixed them having open cities where people could come and go freely because they were now safe again. When they chose new gods, there was war in the cities. So once again, this is the problem. This all happened because instead of sticking to the God of Israel, they chose new gods, and it brought ruin to the land. And she's saying, my heart is toward the lawgivers of Israel. So in other words, the judges, or those that are righteous, they dwell among the people, and they bless the Lord. They sit and provide judgment. They walk the path. They basically live righteously before all the people. And so instead of the sound of people fighting between the cities and between all the places where people draw water from, instead they're going to be hearing the sound of the judges, those who glorify and honor God. So instead of hearing these bad things, such as war and chaos and anarchy, it will instead be replaced with the sound of righteousness. So this is why they're being praised. And it says, arise, Barak, and capture your captive son of Abinoam. So now it's, just furthermore, it talks about all the different ways that they were able to win through God's power. It talks of out of Ephraim, whose root was against Amalek, after you will be Benjamin with your abaters, and so on and so on. And it talks about the different tribes here. It also shows that amongst the different people who fought, that it mentions like these tribes, so out of Zebulun, they that handle the pen of the scribe. Benjamin with your abaters, out of Machir came down officers, out of Zebulun. So it's saying like where these people are going to come out of or have come from, these individuals who have made a great difference. Princes of Issachar were with Deborah. Issachar was with Barak. So it talks about, these are the guys who marched in the battle. But also, let's not forget the divisions of Reuben. There were great resolves of heart. So it sounds like the Reubenites came from across the Jordan River to lend aid in this war, because it does say that in the time after Sisera is killed, that they continued fighting until Yabin was eliminated. So I think we can consider this song to be a recollection of the war that followed, first the defeat of Sisera's chariots, and then after that, the subsequent battles, which included the Reubenites and so on. So that's why they're being mentioned here, because there were wars that followed after. So it mentions, where do you sit between the borders to hear the bleatings of the flocks? At the divisions of Reuben, great searchings of the heart. Gilead abides beyond the Jordan. And Dan, why does he gather into the ships? Asher dwelt at the shores of the seas, and by his breaches he abides. Zebulun is a people that jeopardized their lives to die, as did Naphtali, right? So these are the two tribes that were called to come and fight, and they did so. And it says that they came in to fight the kings of Canaan, and they took no gain of money. So this was purely a war of liberation, not of bounty and booty. It mentions, from the heavens they fought, the stars from their courses fought against Sisera. So outright, this is a divine holy war that had divine intervention to support it. And indeed, the confusion caused Sisera to lose. Pounded by the heels of the horses, by the reason of the prancing of the mighty ones. Curse you, Meroz, said messenger of the Lord. Curse you bitterly, you inhabitants thereof. Because they came not to aid of the Lord, to the aid of the Lord against the mighty. So this is also just kind of denouncing those who did not back up the Israelites or back up God's will here. So now it says, blessed above all women shall be Yael, right? And, he asked for water. She gave him milk. In a lordly bowl, she brought him cream. So it speaks of the way that she did it. And also, of course, how she killed him. As he was weary, she struck him down. And it concludes by saying that back home, Sisera, the general, his mother must have been looking out the window saying, "Oh, where is my son? He really should be home with his army by now. Yet why does he delay? Why is he late?" And the wisest of her princesses answers, she too returns answers to herself, right? So the wisest figures out it's because he's been defeated. And she says, but are they not finding, but aren't they winning? Aren't they just taking their time because they're splitting up all the bounty? No, that is not the case. And so it concludes, "So may perish all your enemies, O Lord, but they that love him should be as the sun when he goes forth in his might." And the land rested 40 years. So there you have it. It wrapped up there with 40 years of peace. And now we jump ahead. 40 years later, we can assume Deborah and her squad of allies are no longer here. The children are going to be doing some more in chapter 6. Let's begin. Chapter 6, verse 1 of Judges. "And the children of Israel did that which displeased the Lord, and the Lord delivered them into the hand of Midian for 7 years. And the hand of Midian prevailed against Israel. Because of Midian, the children of Israel made for themselves the dens which are in the mountains, and the caves, and the strongholds. And it was, when Israel had sown, that Midian came up, and Amalek, and those of the east, and they came up upon it. And they encamped against them, and they destroyed the produce of the earth, until you come to Gaza. They would leave no sustenance in Israel, neither sheep, nor ox, nor donkey. For they and their cattle came up, and their tents, and they came as numerous as locusts, both they and their camels without number, and they came into the land to destroy it. And Israel was very impoverished because of Midian, and the children of Israel cried to the Lord. Now it was, when the children of Israel cried to the Lord concerning Midian, that the Lord sent a prophet to the children of Israel. And he said to them, Thus says the Lord God of Israel, I brought you up from Egypt, and I brought you out of the house of bondage. And I saved you from the hand of Egypt, and from the hand of all your oppressors, and I drove them out from before you, and I have given you their land. And I said to you, I am the Lord your God. You shall not fear the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell, but you have not obeyed me. And the angel of the Lord came and sat under the oak which was in Ophrah, that belonged to Joash the Abiezrite. And his son Gideon was beating out wheat in the winepress, to be enabled to flee from Midian. And the angel of the Lord appeared and said to him, The Lord is with you, mighty man of valor. And Gideon said to him, Please, my Lord, if the Lord be with us, why then has all this befallen us? And where are all his wonders which our forefathers told us, saying, Did not the Lord bring us up from Egypt? But now the Lord has forsaken us, and he has delivered us into the hand of Midian. And the Lord turned toward him and said, Go with this your strength, and save Israel from the hand of Midian. Have I not sent you? And he said to him, Please, O Lord, with what shall I save Israel? Behold, my 1,000 is the poorest in Manasseh, and I am the youngest in my father's household. And the Lord said to him, Because I shall be with you, and you shall strike Midian as one man. And he said to him, If I have now found favor in your eyes, then show me a sign that it is you that speaks with me. Do not move here from now until I come to you, and I shall bring out my offering and lay it before you. And he said, I shall tarry until you return. And Gideon came and prepared a young goat and unleavened cakes of an ephah of meal. The meat he put in the basket, and the broth he put in the pot. And he brought it out to him under the oak and presented it. And the angel of God said to him, Take the meat and unleavened cakes, and lay them upon this rock, and the broth pour out. And he did so. And the angel of God of the Lord put forth the end of the staff that was in his hand, and he touched the meat and the unleavened cakes, and the fire went up out of the rock, and he consumed the meat and the unleavened cakes, and the angel of the Lord departed from before his eyes. Now Gideon saw that he was an angel of the Lord, and Gideon said, Alas, O Lord God, because I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face. And the Lord said to him, Peace be to you, fear not, you shall not die. And Gideon built an altar to the Lord there. He called it, Lord who bestows upon us peace. Until this day it is still in Ophrah of the Abiezrites. Now it was on that night that the Lord said to him, Take the bullock that your father has, and the second bullock 7 years, and you shall destroy the altar of the Baal which belongs to your father, and the Asherah which is next to it you shall cut down. And you shall build an altar to the Lord your God upon the top of this rock in the proper place. And you shall take the second bullock, and offer a burnt offering with the wood of the Asherah which you shall cut down. And Gideon took 10 men of his servants, and did as the Lord had spoken to him. Now it was because he feared his father's household and the men of the city to do it by day that he did it by night. And the men of the city arose early in the morning, and behold, the altar of Baal was broken down, and the Asherah that was next to it was cut down, and the second bullock was offered upon the altar that was built. And they said to one another, Who has done this thing? And they inquired and sought, and they said, Gideon, the son of Joash, has done this thing. And the men of the city said to Joash, Bring out your son that he may die, because he has broken the altar of the Baal, and because he has cut down the Asherah that was next to it. And Joash said to all that stood by him, Will you contend for the Baal? Will you avenge him? He that will contend for him shall be put to death. Tarry until morning. If he be a god, let him contend for himself, because he has broken his altar. And he called him on that day Jerubbaal, saying, Let Baal contend with him, because he has broken down his altar. And all the Midianites and the Amalekites and those of the east assembled together, and they crossed and encamped in the valley of Jezreel. And a spirit of the Lord clothed Gideon, and he blew the trumpet, and Abiezer gathered following him. And he sent messengers throughout all Manasseh, and they too gathered after him. And he sent messengers to Asher, and to Zebulun, and to Naphtali, and they came up towards them. And Gideon said to God, If you will save Israel by my hand, as you have spoken, behold, I shall put a fleece of wool on the threshing floor. If there be dew only on the fleece, and upon all the ground it be dry, then I shall know that you will save Israel by my hand, as you have spoken. And it was so, for he rose up early on the morrow, and pressed the fleece together, and he wrung dew out of the fleece, a bowl full of water. And Gideon said to God, Let not your anger be kindled against me, and I will speak but this once. Let me now experiment but this once with the fleece. Let it now be dry only upon the fleece, and on all the ground let there be dew. And God did so on that night, and it was dry only upon the fleece, and upon all the ground there was dew. End of chapter 6. So now let's go ahead and conclude for today's episode. As it notes, once again, after the era of Deborah, the children of Israel sin. 7 years of Midianite conquest hold them as hostage under the Midianite rule. So it says, because of the Midians, the children of Israel made for themselves dens which are in the mountains and the caves and the strongholds. So it seems like this is why the people of Israel had to start creating like hideouts, because the Midianites made it so difficult. So anyway, it says that Israel had sown, that Midian came up, and Amalek and those of the east, they came upon it. So it was after Israel had settled in and they'd been doing so much wrong, suddenly the Israelites are now overwhelmed. Everything up until Gaza is basically destroyed. All the food, all the livestock, it's totally crashed up. It's like total, what do they call that? When you destroy all the food and whatnot when you're invading or fleeing, whatever they call that in the military, right? When you're scorched earth policy, they are doing that. They are just wiping out the Israelite stockade, and they are very impoverished because of it. So they're crying, and they're like, oh, help us, God. These Midianites are terrible. God sends them a prophet, and it is, of course, Gideon. And so Gideon is just the youngest of his family, and not only that, but he comes from a very poor people within Manasseh. So he is, however, faithful. The Lord sends an angel, and the angel says, you are a mighty man of valor, the Lord is with you. And Gideon says, if the Lord is with us, right, why has this all happened? Where are all the wonders which our forefathers told us? So he's saying, I heard the stories about God liberating us from Egypt, but why has he forsaken us? Where is he? And he tells him, well, actually, funny you should ask that. You're going to liberate them. It's going to be your job. Have I not sent you? And so he says, well, how am I going to do it? Please tell me. I'm nothing. I'm come from nothing. How am I going to do this? He says, because I'll be with you and you will strike Midian as one man. In other words, I'm going to unify your people behind you and you will take out Midian. And he says, okay, so I'm not doubting you, but if I have truly found favor in your eyes, can you prove it's really you? And he says, don't move. And here, don't move. I'm going to go get something for you. And so he runs off and he brings out 3 items. He brings out the young goat, the unleavened cakes of an ephah of meal, the meat, and the broth in a pot. And this is actually, I love this. It took me reading this second time through to find the little secret here. So he says, can you prove to me that you are who you say you are? Can you prove to me that you're God? And so Gideon does something really smart. He prepares a meal. He prepares the young goat, unleavened cakes of an ephah, and he gets some broth. Why did he get broth? What is the significance of this? Why? And this is, now that I'm reading it in the breakdown part, I think I got the answer. This was his test. If he truly was the God of Israel, he would not want the broth, because that is not part of the tradition. In other words, only the real God of Israel would not just consume the correct stuff with fire, but say, get rid of the broth. That's not for me. So he says, take the meat and the unleavened cakes, lay them on the rock, pour out the broth. So, in other words, he's saying, I don't want the broth because that is not what I accept as an offering. Also, my initial thought when I read it was because it's a liquid, he's not going to burn it up. But God could steam it. So it's not like he can't heat it up. No. I think that was the test. He says, prove to me, show me a sign that it is you that speaks with me. So what he does is he brings an intentionally partially incorrect offering to see if it's really him. And it is really him, because he says, pour out the broth, lay out these other items, and then behold, the staff lights it up and it's brought up in fire. And in this moment, he realizes, oh God, literally, alas, oh Lord God, because I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face. So he's now screwed in his head. He's like, oh man, I blew it. I just saw the angel of God. I'm done for. And God says, don't be afraid. You shall not die. And so he builds an altar, and Lord who bestows upon us peace is the name he gives it. Why? Well, he brought him peace of mind just now, and also he's going to liberate them. And it says this has still stood today. So now he tells him, take the bullock that your father has and the second one, 7 years, so 7 years old, destroy the altar of Baal and the Asherah, which is next to it, cut it down. So funny enough, coming off of the tail end of the Christmas season, we see mention of Baal and the Asherah. And it's interesting because I've heard people talk about it when they refer to the different gods of the pantheon in that era. And they will often suggest that the Asherah is like the wife of the God of Israel, when in this case it actually looks more like Asherah is the wife of Baal. And so in any case, he's saying, you're going to destroy both of those. You're going to cut down the Asherah tree, and you're going to destroy that altar of Baal, which belongs to your father. And so he does so. And then he's going to take that second one, the second bull, and you're going to make an offering, a burnt offering with the wood coming from the tree that you're going to cut down. So he takes 10 servants from his father's group of servants, and in the middle of the night, because he's worried about being attacked during the day if he gets caught doing this, he destroys them. And now the people come out and they're like, hey, who did this? Which one of these people out here ruined our altar to Baal and the Asherah tree? We gotta get him. So they start trying to figure out who done it, and they finally figure it out. It's Gideon, son of Joash. And they go to Joash and they say, hey, give us your son because he needs to be put to death because he broke the altar of Baal and cut down the tree. And Joash says, oh, will you contend for Baal? Will you avenge him? He that will contend for him shall be put to death. Tarry until morning. If he be a god, let him contend for himself because he has broken the altar. So in other words, he's saying to him, it's the classic Abraham story of when they say Abraham smashed all the idols in his father's shop. And he said, Abraham claimed the idol came to life. And his father was like, idols can't do that. He's like, really? Then why do you worship them? Same situation here. Yoash is saying, what, you're going to fight on behalf of the idol? How about you let the God fight for himself and let's see what happens? Sure enough, nothing happens. Gideon is fine. And so this shows that let Baal contend with him because he has broken down his altar. He's saying, yeah, let Baal take care of it. But look at that. Nothing came of it because this God means nothing. So now, moving along, the Midianites, the Amalekites, and those of the east assemble together. They camp in the valley of Jezreel. So they are basically forming up for war. And Gideon, he gets the Spirit of God around him. Remember, this is very similar to what Joshua and Moses experienced as well. So he is leading them now into battle. He blows the trumpet and gathers all the people of Abiezer around him and sends messengers throughout all Manasseh, and they gather around. And Asher, Zebulun, Naphtali, they come up too, and they're building an army. And Gideon says to God, if you will save Israel by my hand as you've spoken, let's do one last set of tests. So he already believes in God. But this is now a test for the sake of everybody else because he now has witnesses to back him up. So first he says, let me put this out here, this fleece, and let by morning, when the morning dew comes, let the fleece be wet, but nothing else. And so the next morning he comes out and the fleece is the only thing that's wet. He wrings it dry and it's like a whole bowl full of water. So it's not like a little bit. Then he's like, okay. If I may, just one more request. One last test. I want to experiment here. Let me do the inverse. Please don't get mad. Will you show everybody that we're telling the truth by making everything else wet but leaving it dry this time? And sure enough, as it concludes this chapter, God told the truth because the fleece was dry and the ground was wet. And so there we have at the end of this portion explanation. Gideon seems to be among the most righteous that we've seen so far. His story is very interesting, and surely in many ways I think his tale harkens much to those of the greatest that preceded him, like I mentioned, like Moses, like Joseph, or not Joseph, like Joshua, these individuals. There's a lot of parallel here in the humility of this, and we'll see this in other individuals in the future as well. But nevertheless, that's the end of this week's episode. Thank you so much for listening to the Weekly Parashahcast Season 2. I found it very educational. I hope you did too. Until next time, this has been Shmuel Moshe. Tune in next time for more of Shoftim. Until then, Baruch Hashem.